On Christmas morning, I stood in my childhood bedroom, surrounded by sealed boxes. Cold light spilled through the window as my father froze, staring at his phone screen, his face draining shade by shade. My mother clutched Holden's arm. My brother, like if she let go, the whole world would collapse. On the desk, the acceptance letter to a research institute in D.C. lay glaringly bright, the one thing they never expected me to have. Just 24 hours earlier, they had threatened to cut off my tuition unless I knelt and apologized to Holden for daring to report his cheating. I had simply smiled and said, "All right." They had no idea. That sentence was the beginning of a storm. Before I tell you what happened after that Christmas morning, tell me where you're watching from and what time it is for you right now. I always want to know who is here with me through these difficult chapters of my life. Now let me take you back to where the storm in my life truly began. There are memories you think you've forgotten, until they return, explaining why the pain cuts so deeply. My name is Marina Hale. I grew up in a gray wooden house in Vermont, where the hallway walls were always lined with photos of Holden. His frames were large, polished, replaced every summer. Mine were small, tilted on the staircase wall, as if taped there just to fill space. On winter mornings, sunlight streamed through the windows, reflecting off those frames, reminding me every day exactly who the center of this house was. In the kitchen, Mom always asked Holden about school, teams, coaches, and me. Every time I opened my mouth to share something, she would place her hand on the spoon and smile without even looking at me. Another time, "Sweetheart, right now, Mom wants to hear from your brother." Sometimes the cold outside felt warmer than the silence they reserved for me. When I was 12 years old, my very first science project won first place. I stood in the lobby of the auditorium, holding my small plaque, watching other parents rush to hug their children, take photos, beam with pride. I waited until the speakers finally announced, "The event has ended." Mom never came. She was busy taking Holden to a swim team tryout. When I got home, Dad looked at my certificate for all of 2 seconds before setting it on the table. "Good. But you need to try harder to keep up with Holden." Keep up, I just wanted to be seen. Yet every effort I made felt like it dropped into a well with no echo. Holden only had to breathe to be praised. And I felt like I was trying in a room where no one bothered to turn on the light. 1 year. Holden turned in a complex scientific research paper so advanced the teacher called personally to praise his brilliance. But I knew he had spent the entire week playing video games, falling asleep on the sofa, not touching a single notebook. When I looked at the printed copy Holden had left in the kitchen, I froze. Parts of it felt eerily familiar, identical to a research paper I had once read at the library. I stood still, a chill crawling up my spine. Then I brushed it off. It can't be. This is Holden. My brother. My parents hugged each other, thrilled, as if they were witnessing the bright future of the Hale family genius, and I began doubting my own instincts. During winter dinners, every conversation circled back to Holden. When I tried to join in, Mom would place her hand on my shoulder, her voice soft as snowflakes, yet sharp enough to silence me. Another time, Marina, once, when I had a high fever and was bedridden for 3 days. I heard my parents open Holden's door to ask if he felt unwell, if he needed anything. And me. They only called down the hallway. "Did you take your medicine? Mom and Dad are busy right now." I curled under my blanket, watching the snow fall outside, and for the first time wondered if I could disappear and no one would notice immediately. One late night, I walked past my room and saw the faint glow of my laptop screen. The door was slightly open. Inside, Holden was sitting right in front of my computer. He shut the screen the second he heard my footsteps. "Your laptop was acting up. I was checking it for you, he said, too smoothly to be believable. My laptop had never had issues. Holden had never cared about anything that belonged to me. And that smile too quick, too performed. I stood in the doorway, heart pounding, realizing for the first time that the strange feeling that had followed me for years wasn't imaginary. I didn't know it then. But that moment Holden touching my laptop was the first crack in the perfect wall surrounding him. And this time, I wouldn't look away. Sometimes the truth doesn't arrive like an explosion. It seeps in little by little, like water slipping through a crack in a wall you always believed was solid. After the night I saw Holden in front of my laptop, everything in the house suddenly became loud. Not because of noise, but because unease kept scraping against my mind, like metal grinding on metal. I tried to ignore it, but every time I opened my laptop, I saw strange traces files I hadn't touched showing as recently opened, drafts with altered modification times, metadata marking hours when I knew I was asleep. One snowy morning, I sat at my desk, watching pale light reflect against the black screen. Holden walked past my door, glancing into my room so quickly anyone else would have missed it. But not me. Not after seeing his hand on something that didn't belong to him. A small suspicion began to take root. And I knew. I had to dig before everything got buried again. I started with the sync history. Each timestamp looked like a piece of a map leading somewhere I didn't want to go but couldn't avoid. A file opened at 2:17 a.m., while I was fast asleep. Another downloaded from a device using an unfamiliar IP address. I cross-checked the dates, and my wrist went cold immediately. They lined up with weekends when Holden came home to visit. I asked Lucas from the lab to show me how to dig deeper into metadata. He looked at me for a long moment, then asked Marina, "Who are you looking for?" I answered, "Not who. Something I missed." When I logged into my school email, a notification popped up. Your account was accessed from an off-campus IP address. I froze. For the first time. I didn't think I was being paranoid. Someone was looking for something in my computer, and they knew exactly where to look. Once the curtain of suspicion lifted, I was forced to re-examine everything through new eyes. All of Holden's breakthrough achievements, the ones my family worshipped, suddenly looked unfamiliar. I remembered that science fair year vividly. Holden played video games almost the entire week, leaving dry ramen cups on the table, falling asleep on the sofa. And yet his submission read like a university-level thesis. When I reviewed the copy Mom had kept, I nearly jolted. Several paragraphs were identical to a research article I had read in the library. Not similar, identical. Then came his college application essay. I once thought Holden had suddenly matured, but reading it again, the writing felt artificially aged, like it had been stitched together from multiple sources. I remembered losing one of my own essay drafts to a hard drive glitch back then. And just a few weeks later, Holden's teacher praised his exceptional analytical thinking. For the first time in my life, I drew a straight line through everything. Every time I lost something, Holden gained a new achievement. This was no longer a feeling, no longer a suspicion. It was a pattern, and he had repeated it for nearly a decade. What I found next didn't just expose Holden. It exposed an entire system built on lies. I sat in front of the screen, cold blue light hardening my face. It had started as intuition. But metadata is always more honest than memory. Holden's 11th grade science report appeared. I scrolled down. Every paragraph, every chart felt chillingly familiar. The metadata listed the final edit at 3 a.m., the exact hour I had been asleep in the room across the hall. But what froze me even more, the last editor wasn't Holden. It was a secondary account created on the same day I had first given him my study notes. I opened another file. Half the content was taken directly from the PDF I had once sent him to help my brother stand out. The protein models I had drawn by hand, the annotations I wrote when he felt desperate before a deadline. I had called it sibling support, but the data called it exploitation. I kept digging. At 16 years old, the National STEM project copied from a university student's research. At 18, the biology thesis pieced together from foreign documents. Only then did I finally understand Holden wasn't just good at hiding, he was good at using people. And the person he used most was me. I created a new folder, Holden case. One by one, evidence files went in glowing red as the software auto-highlighted every matching segment. Each time I hit save, I felt like I was closing a door I had left open for far too long. I organized everything by year 14 years old, 37% matching my study materials. 16. Charts copied word for word. 18. The protein structures I had once explained to him. This was no longer sibling rivalry. This was a misconduct record built over almost 10 years. I wasn't collecting these to take revenge. I was collecting them to protect myself because for the first time, I saw clearly if I didn't control the narrative, Holden would control it for me. But then, in a file buried deep, I found a log of unauthorized access to my school account the same night I wrote the most important section of my research project. The device logged in under Holden's name, but the person behind that device was not Holden. It was someone else in the family. The deepest hurt isn't when someone betrays you. It's when you realize you've gotten used to being overlooked for far too long. I sat still on the edge of my bed, Seattle light filtering through the curtains blue and gray like the afternoons of my childhood. Some memories don't need to be summoned. They find their way back on their own. Usually at the moments when you're at your weakest. I remember a winter day when I was 9 years old. I had just won first place in a school art competition, the certificate still smelling of fresh ink. I ran home holding it tight, heart pounding with excitement. But when I opened the door, the first thing I saw was Mom standing in the living room, holding Holden's third-place math trophy, beaming as if it were made of gold. My brilliant boy. Her voice rang with pure pride. No one noticed me standing right there at the doorway. The paper in my hand slowly slipped. I remember bending down to pick it up quickly, afraid someone might see it fall. Then I went upstairs quietly, unnoticed, unasked. Back then, I didn't understand why my chest ached, as if someone had touched something raw inside me. Now I know that was the first time I learned to shrink myself just enough to fit into the world my family had drawn. A world where Holden was always the center. And I was just the blurred background. Growing up in this house, I slowly became accustomed to the feeling of dissolving into the air. I remember when I scored 1,480 on the SAT, a score any kid would be praised for. I brought the result to the kitchen, hope blooming in my chest. But Dad merely glanced at it and said, Holden got 1,530 that year. His voice light, like talking about the weather. But my chest hit stone. I remember the evening Holden got accepted into Summer Science Academy. The whole family went out to celebrate. I sat in the corner, listening to them talk about Holden's brilliant future, Holden's genius potential, the Hale family's pride. No one asked about the essay I was working on. No one remembered I had applied to the same program, except I hadn't been accepted. These memories looped for years. I excel. Holden excels more. I worked hard. Holden was born that way. I wanted to be seen. Holden needed the spotlight more. And I slowly disappeared. And nobody noticed. Looking at the files Holden had stolen, I suddenly understood why the truth suffocated me so much. It wasn't because he used my work. It was because my entire life had been used to lift him up while I believed I simply wasn't good enough to stand beside him. The truth was never new. It was only now being called by its real name. I placed my hand on the folder, Holden Case A01, and took a deep breath. Something was shifting inside me, slow but unmistakable, like winter ice cracking under the first touch of sunlight. I realized I was never a shadow. I was just placed where no light could reach me. I remembered being 17 years old when Holden looked straight at me and said, "You're smart, but you don't have the kind of breakthrough potential I have." And I believed him, believed it so deeply that I shrank myself in every room, every conversation, every opportunity. But now, staring at the pile of stolen work, I knew that had never been true. Without me, would those achievements my family worshipped even exist? My entire youth was made of things I contributed that no one counted. But I counted, and for the first time, I didn't feel as invisible as they'd made me believe. I don't want revenge. I want to stand where I actually belong. I want to speak the truth I've kept quiet for far too long. And to do that, I will have to face the entire Hale family. If you're still watching at this point, comment the number 1 so I know you're still here with me in this story. No one knew that Christmas didn't end with warm wishes. It ended with the truth being torn open right in the middle of the dinner table. I walked down the wooden stairs glowing with Christmas lights, my hand gripping my laptop as if holding a secret powerful enough to shatter the entire Hale family with a single click. Cold air from the hallway window brushed against my skin, sharpening my senses in a brutal, merciless way. In the kitchen, Mom's laughter blended with the clinking of forks and knives, familiar sounds. But tonight, they felt like the opening cues of a performance where everyone knew their role, except me. I stopped in front of the mirror near the staircase. My reflection looked back at me calm in a way that surprised even me. No anger, no trembling. Just someone who had finally crossed the threshold of her endurance and knew there was no turning back. From afar at the dining table, I saw them: Dad, Mom, Holden, the picture-perfect family portrait, warm yellow lights, a full Christmas spread, red wine already poured, a model Christmas scene, a model lie. I knew that when I pulled out my chair and sat down, the air would change. I knew that when I opened my laptop, everything they believed in would begin to crack. What I didn't expect was how light I suddenly felt. Light. As if for the first time in my life I was about to enter this room as my real self, no longer standing in the halo cast by Holden. "Marina, you're here," Mom said, her voice bright in a way that sounded forced. Holden turned toward me, his smile perfect, like in all the framed photos hung throughout the house. He raised his wine glass to greet me, as if tonight was just a simple family gathering. I looked around the table. Some things only make sense when you really look. The way Mom's eyes sparkled every time Holden spoke, Dad's eager nods, the excessive confidence in every one of Holden's gestures. They still believed in their story. The story where Holden was the star, and I was the one lucky to stand in the leftover light. Holden started talking about his lab, his breakthroughs, his groundbreaking procedures, the research he spoke of with the tone of a natural-born genius. Every word he spoke wrapped another layer of deception around the table, then another, and another. Dad laughed. "One day, Marina will be just like Holden." The familiar sentence. A sentence I heard so often as a child that it felt like the roadmap of my life. I would always come after him. But tonight, I wasn't here to hear that again. I was here to end it. I placed the laptop on the table. The soft click was small, but sharp enough to turn every pair of eyes toward me. Holden's expression flickered for a split second. He knew that sound wasn't part of a peaceful Christmas dinner. Not tonight. The air around the table tightened until I could hear the faint creak of wood inside the chair frames. Holden looked at me, his polite smile still in place, but his eyes beginning to tremble. I opened the laptop. The screen lit up, casting cold blue light across everyone's faces. "Tonight," I said slowly and clearly, We're going to tell the truth. I pulled out a stack of printed papers, 6 months' worth of metadata logs, and set them directly in front of Holden. The sound of the pages hitting the table was crisp and dry, like a slap that never needed to touch skin. Dad frowned. Marina, what do you think you're doing? I didn't look at him. Tonight isn't about me, and it isn't about Christmas. Tonight is about the truth. Holden glanced down at the first page. I saw the moment his face hardened upload dates, edit timestamps, IP logs from my laptop, and finally, the identification line showing the file's original source belonged to me. This Holden stammered. You're misunderstanding. This is just reference material. I tilted my head. Reference. As in copying every line and replacing the name. Mom instantly cut in, her voice sharp and urgent. Marina, you're ruining the family atmosphere. No, I replied. I'm fixing something that's been broken for a long time. Dad looked at Holden, then at me, confusion, anger, and fear all blending into a muted gray on his face. In that moment, I knew they saw it. They just didn't want to believe it. Holden shoved his chair back and stood abruptly. You have no right to do this. You don't understand how research works. Everyone uses each other's material. You used mine, I said, without asking, without credit, without a single acknowledgement. Mom stood up too. You're being unreasonable. Marina Holden is the one holding this family together. You can't just holding it together by stealing someone else's work. I cut her off. Dad slammed his hand on the table. Enough, Marina. You're humiliating your brother. I looked straight at him. I'm only bringing the truth into the light. If the truth humiliates him, that's not my fault. Silence swallowed the entire table. For the first time in my life, all their eyes weren't looking at me like a shadow. They were looking at me like someone they could no longer control. The overhead lights flickered slightly, and I felt clearly that the power in this house was shifting, slowly, but forcefully. Christmas had never felt as cold as it did that night. 8 o'clock in the morning was only 3 minutes away, and Holden still had no idea his life was about to collapse. The Hale kitchen was washed in the pale silver-gray light of a Colorado winter. Marina stood by the counter, hands wrapped around a steaming cup of coffee, hearing every tick of the wall clock, each sound stretching the skin across her ribs a little tighter. Holden walked in, hair messy, pajamas wrinkled, radiating the confidence of a man who believed he'd won last night's argument. Marina, he said, pouring coffee with that familiar tone, condescending, certain everything had already been resolved. You made things hard for Mom and Dad last night. Just apologize today, and everything will fall back into place. Marina didn't answer. She only looked at the clock. 7:57 a.m. Light brushed across Holden's face, revealing tiny cracks of tension he was trying to hide. Marina saw them, and it made her breathe deeper, steadier. Holden continued his monologue. You blew this out of proportion. Redwood Genomics doesn't play games. If you keep accusing me, they'll bring in lawyers. Mom and Dad won't survive that. And you know it. Marina set her cup down, the soft ceramic tap slicing through the air. I know. Holden frowned, confused for the first time by her silence. 7:58 a.m. Even the air in the kitchen tightened, as if the whole house sensed what was coming and held its breath. A coldness slid down Marina's spine, not from fear, but from the knowledge that she was ending an entire chapter of her life. You thought I'd cry, didn't you? Marina asked quietly. Holden scoffed. I thought you'd come to your senses. 7:59 a.m. The scheduled emails set at 3 in the morning were waking up in servers across the country. Marina placed her hand against the counter, feeling her pulse sync with the ticking clock. Holden sipped his coffee, smug, relaxed, and completely unaware of the storm hanging over him. Do you know what the saddest part is? Marina said. Holden turned, Annoyed. 800 hours. A soft ding echoed from Marina's phone. The storm officially began. Holden's phone started vibrating once, then 10 times in rapid succession. The first sound wasn't a scream, it was the shattering of a cup slipping from Holden's hand. His phone kept vibrating, each pulse stronger, like the heartbeat of someone about to faint. He looked at the screen and his face drained instantly. The first message glowed Stanford School of Medicine, notice of investigation. Then the second, the third, the fourth. Red notifications flooded the screen like cracks spreading across thin ice. Redwood Genomics Integrity Office. California Medical Licensing Board. Request for immediate documentation review. Holden staggered back, the cup sliding from his fingers and exploding against the tile floor. The sharp sound made Marina feel as if the entire house had shifted off its axis. "Marina, what did you do?" Holden whispered. Marina didn't answer. She stood straight, fingers resting on the counter, her palms cold, but her eyes steady. His phone rang again. Holden opened a long email, and the confident mask he'd worn his whole life collapsed into raw terror. "We have received substantial evidence indicating research misconduct. Failure to respond within 24 hours will result in automatic suspension." Holden looked at Marina as if she had yanked the ground out from under him. "No, no, you can't do this to me. This is my career, my future, my... It's the result of everything you stole," Marina said. Her calmness strangled Holden's voice. Richard and Evelyn appeared at the end of the hallway, half asleep but alarmed by the broken glass on the floor. "What's going on, Holden? What happened?" "It's Christmas." Holden turned to them, hands shaking so badly he dropped his phone again. "Dad, Mom, they're investigating me. All of them. Stanford, Redwood, the medical board. They're saying I plagiarized, that I falsified procedures, that I..." His voice cracked. Evelyn covered her mouth. Richard looked at Marina, the expression of a man searching desperately for the most convenient explanation to cling to. "Marina, what did you do?" Marina didn't respond. She just checked the clock. 8:03 a.m. And the next wave of emails was on its way. Then the landline, a phone the Hale family never used, began to ring. The caller ID flashed Stanford Med. The call from Stanford didn't just shatter the morning, it shattered the image of the perfect son the Hale family had worshipped for 25 years. Richard picked up the phone, his hands visibly trembling. "Johnson Residence." He didn't even finish before a cold, sharp voice cut through the line. "This is Dr. Meredith Lang from Stanford School of Medicine. We need to discuss the case of Holden Hale immediately." The kitchen turned to stone. Holden lunged forward, yanking the phone from his father like a drowning man grabbing the last piece of driftwood. "Dr. Lang, hi, no, it's not what you think. I can explain." Richard and Evelyn stood frozen, watching their son cling to a door that had already slammed shut. "Dr." Lang's voice erased whatever hope he still had. "We have received complete documentation, unauthorized logins, duplicated drafts, and timestamps showing that Holden Hale accessed multiple research accounts without permission." Richard's face drained. Evelyn collapsed into a chair. Holden gasped. I only borrowed ideas, I edited them. Stanford has enacted an immediate suspension. The medical board has opened an investigation." "Holden, you need legal representation." The line went dead. No one breathed. Marina didn't smile. She didn't gloat. She stood still as cold water, silently watching the truth settle across the room. Holden spun toward her, eyes bloodshot. "What do you want from me? Do you want to destroy my life?" Richard stepped toward her, voice breaking. "Marina, do you understand this will drag the whole family down? Our house, our insurance, our reputation." Evelyn sobbed. How could you report him like this? Holden is your brother. Did you think about what this does to us? Marina looked at all three of them. Slowly, clearly, without a single tremor. I didn't destroy this family, she said. I just stopped protecting a lie. Holden laughed a cracked, hysterical sound. A lie. What do you know? You're just... He froze. Because Richard had just noticed a stack of documents on the table. The Georgetown envelope. The D.C. lease contract. The scholarship letter. All three of them turned toward Marina. Marina pulled out a chair and sat down. Her voice soft as winter air. I'm leaving today, and I don't need anything from you anymore. The envelope stamped in bright red ink lay on the front porch like an unopened verdict. Richard picked it up, the cold seeping into his fingers as if foreshadowing something disastrous. Evelyn stood behind him, holding her breath when she saw the words Harvard Office of Academic Conduct. Urgent. Richard opened it. The paper slid out light, but sharp as a blade. Harvard formally revokes the Doctor of Medicine degree of Holden Hale. Full scholarship repayment required within 90 days. Evelyn broke into tears. Holden staggered backward, face turning ghost white, gripping the edge of the table as if his legs could no longer hold him. Before anyone could speak, the landline rang, its piercing tones slicing through the frozen air. Richard answered. A woman's voice from Stanford came through, precise, cold, leaving no room for hope. We are calling to inform you that Holden Hale has been placed on emergency suspension. All research access has been revoked. Holden lunged forward, desperate to regain even a shred of control. No, I'm leading that project. That project has been reassigned, and you are required to appear at Stanford tomorrow for a formal hearing. Evelyn looked at Marina, her voice warped. How is this happening? How do they know everything? Marina didn't answer. She simply watched the collapse of the thing her family had worshipped as an unshakable truth. Holden clawed at the table edge. No, this isn't real. What did you do? The landline rang again, the screen flashing California Medical Board. The second call wasn't about investigation, it was about patience. Richard picked up, hands trembling. This is Richard Hale. A deep, steady male voice replied. California Medical Board. We require immediate contact with Holden Hale regarding patient safety concerns. Evelyn gripped the counter until her knuckles whitened. And Holden, once the arrogant star of the hospital rotation, stood frozen, as though every drop of blood had drained from his body. Patient safety, I didn't do anything wrong, Holden gasped. We have received a report from Redwood General Hospital, the voice continued. Your treatment protocol shows signs of misplaced contextual copying, which may lead to severe complications. Holden shook his head violently. No, that's not possible. I just adjusted the dosage algorithm. A new notification buzzed on his phone. Redwood General. Suspension notice. All documents and access privileges have been revoked, the voice repeated. Evelyn sobbed. Holden. Tell me, what did you do? Holden clutched his head and collapsed onto the cold tile floor. I didn't mean to. I just wanted the project to be perfect. I didn't think they'd dig this deep. Richard turned to Marina, voice cracking. Do you understand the consequences? This could drag our whole family into court. Marina stood tall, meeting his eyes without flinching. If the medical system doesn't investigate, then patients will be the ones who suffer. No one replied. Only the wind seeping through the doorframe remained cold, long and heavy, like the answer they refused to acknowledge. Sudden, urgent knocking rattled the front door. Richard opened it to find two men in suits holding badges. Redwood Hospital, Risk Management. We need to speak with Holden Hale immediately. It wasn't the hospitals or universities that delivered the final blow, it was their own family. The morning hadn't even ended when Richard's phone rang again. This time, not an institution but his younger brother, Uncle Marcus. "Richard, I just read the email Marina sent," he said, voice grave. "This isn't a misunderstanding. Holden has been plagiarizing for years, and the evidence is undeniable." Evelyn froze. This was the relative she always believed would defend Holden. Another call came in. Aunt Meredith, then Grandpa Hale, then longtime family friends, all with the same question. How did you let this go on for so long? Richard's hands shook. For the first time in his life, he had no excuse to offer. Evelyn swallowed, trying to keep her voice steady. "Holden, tell me the truth. Did you really do all this?" Holden wasn't angry anymore, only terrified. I didn't think they'd check. I thought they trusted me." The house phone rang again, a long, sharp note, like a warning siren. Richard answered, his face drained after just 3 seconds. That was the professional liability insurance office," he whispered. "Their warning. If a patient files a complaint, they may refuse to cover the damages because of fraudulent behavior." Evelyn's knees buckled. "Are we going to lose the house?" Richard didn't answer. His silence said everything. Marina stood a few steps away, arms lowered, expression neutral. Not victorious, not vengeful, just the quiet clarity of someone watching a family finally face the cost of the choices they'd defended for 25 years. Holden looked up at her, voice shredded. "You destroyed this family," Marina answered, soft but sharp. "No. I just stopped hiding the truth. Everyone else kept protecting." A police siren wailed outside the door. A uniformed officer stepped onto the porch and spoke. "We have a summons for Holden Hale regarding unauthorized access to restricted research systems." 6 months later, Washington, D.C., was no longer the place Marina escaped to. It was the place she belonged. Morning light stretched across the wide glass panels of the Redwood Genomics Institute. Marina stood amidst the steady whir of protein analyzers, the rhythmic sound she jokingly called the heartbeat of effort. Cool blue reflections washed across her face, revealing a woman finally living at the level of ability no one in the Hale family had ever bothered to see. She was no longer the girl standing in the cold kitchen of Boulder Creek, shaking beneath favoritism and denial. Now, she was Marina Hale, the lead of a small but promising regenerative protein therapy project. Colleagues asked for her input during meetings. Supervisors trusted her with essential assignments. A message lit up on her screen. "Congratulations. Your research abstract has been selected for presentation at the national conference." Marina placed her hand on the desk and exhaled softly. Not out of pride, but from the quiet realization that she finally stood in the place meant for her, not for her family, not in comparison to Holden, but simply for herself. The file in front of her read, "Primary Investigator, M. Hale." For the first time, the name Hale felt like companionship, not chains. While Marina stepped into a new life, the Hale household lived inside silences so long they hurt. Richard stood in the living room, staring at Holden's graduation photos, the pride in those old images now stinging his eyes. Evelyn, who once said, "My son is perfect," now sat alone in the small home library, reading research articles about parental favoritism. Each page peeled away another layer of illusion she had crafted for more than 2 decades. And Holden, he sent Marina one email each month. No excuses, no defenses, just short, painfully honest lines. "You came up in my therapy session today. I'm re-reporting all the plagiarized data. I want to become someone you could respect, even just a little." Marina didn't reply to all of them, but each time she read one, she felt something more clearly. Not everyone changes, but someone who wants to change deserves the chance to try. One summer afternoon, Marina stood on Key Bridge, watching the Potomac drift quietly, carrying the golden reflection of the setting sun. The city beneath her didn't feel loud or distant anymore. It felt like a new chapter she was writing line by line. Her phone buzzed. A message from her mother Marina. "We're proud of you. We're learning." Little by little. She read it slowly, then put her phone away. Not out of coldness, but because her heart had grown enough to know that not every message needs an immediate answer. She walked across the bridge, hearing the wind slide through the railings, feeling as if she had finally stepped out of that small house in Boulder Creek, not with her feet, but with her self-respect, she whispered, as a promise to herself. "From now on, my life is mine." A notification popped up. "Your channel has a new comment. If you're ready to tell your story, I'm here to listen." There are afternoons in Washington, D.C., when I stand before the lab's glass window, watching the sunset fall across distant rooftops. Every time, my mind returns to that Christmas morning, the moment my old world cracked open so I could step into a different version of myself. I didn't defeat anyone. I simply walked away from a place that no longer had room for me, to find one where I was finally seen. If you've ever been overlooked, if you've ever been compared until you forgot your own worth, if you've ever sat inside your own home and felt like the extra piece in the room, I hope you understand this. You are not invisible. You're just standing in the wrong place. And sometimes, courage isn't about winning, it's about leaving at the right moment. If you're still here, comment the number 2 so I know you've stayed with me until the end of this journey. I appreciate that more than you know. Thank you for being here, not just to listen to a story, but to share a piece of your heart with mine. Don't forget to like and subscribe so I can continue sharing more meaningful and inspiring stories with you. See you in the next story.